Good morning. I'm going to wish a happy birthday to my sister-in-law, Mary, this morning. She usually pays attention or watches at some point, so happy birthday, Mary. And I'm going to do a little different today. 1 Timothy has 6 chapters in it. Today we're reading chapter 5, and I'm just going to look at chapter 6 a little bit today again. Finish up 1 Timothy, and then on Monday we'll start afresh with 2 Timothy. So here we go. Chapter 5 starts with, Paul is talking about duties of believers. And he starts out with, do not speak harshly to an elder man, but speak to him as a brother. Speak to your, be considerate of other people. He's talking about how we live and how we treat each other. And then he goes on and he talks about taking care of the widows and taking care of the orphans and taking care of the elders and watching out for people in your community. And he's got some advice, and some of it I agree with, and some of it I kind of raise my eyebrows a little. But as a community, we are to watch out for those others around us. And I know that in the communities that I've lived in, we do watch out for our widows and our elderly, and we pay attention to what's going on, and I guess I can't say everybody does that, but we kind of pay a little bit more attention that way, and I know there was one lady that at one place that she was living on a fixed income, and her whole family came one year at Christmas time, and of course she took care of them. And boy, it was pretty tough for her after that for a little while, just to get back on her feet again after having taken care of her family. And community kind of stepped up and watched out. And this is a part of who we are as God's family. We watch out for those around us and pay attention. And it's we can find other references to that in the Bible as well. That just to pay attention to our community and to watch out for all people that way. And so those, basically in chapter 5, he's talking about interaction with others in our community and who we are as a person. And chapter 6, he kind of continues within that, I guess chapter 5 is verse 23. It says, "No longer drink only water, but take a little wine with it for the sake of your stomach and your frequent ailments." There's nothing wrong with a glass of wine or a can of beer or a drink or something. Science has proven that a glass of wine can be very beneficial for your health in a lot of ways. But it's a glass of wine, not 3 or 4 or 5 bottles, or to be taken up in drunkenness, and that's one of the things that Paul has addressed in different places too. But in other words, Paul is saying be aware of what your body needs, and take care of it in many ways that way, and just to keep going as you are that way. And chapter 6, he starts out, talking about the yoke of slavery, with your masters, so the name of God would be respectful and everything that way. And he talks about teaching other people the duties of how they should live, of everything that Paul has talked about in this letter to Timothy. He's saying to Timothy, teach others in this same manner. Teach them to be kind and courteous and to be respectful, to be watching out for others, and above all, to keep and honor God. And in doing our jobs to the very best of our ability and being who we are to the very best of our ability is honoring God. It's just kind of, sometimes we don't think about it that way, that, as we live, we are honoring God or dishonoring God, whichever the case may be. And he talks about, the gain of godliness as we go on. And then when we get a little further down, we get to verse 10 in chapter 6. And this is a verse I've referred to once in a while, and it's a verse that is often misquoted. I'm going to read it to you from the New Revised Standard. "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, And in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. So it isn't money that's the root of all evil. It's the love of money is a root. It isn't the only root of evil, but it's the love of money. And it's the love of prestige. It's the needing to have the attention. It's the needing to be above yourself. And he talks about, if you're rich, that's fine. But just don't be haughty about it. Don't put yourself on a pedestal. Don't be a hoity-toity, look at me for what? Yeah, all of that kind of stuff. But if you're fortunate enough to be rich or to have a job that provides, for your well-being, be content with what you have, be generous with what you have, be grateful for what you have, and don't look down upon someone else that doesn't have as much. I had a conversation with a person. He's not a lot younger than I am, but a few years younger than I am, and he had a good job. It was a job that sometimes you get called out, any and all hours of the day, and it could be, a dangerous job. But he said, I'm fortunate that I have a job that I can provide a good living for my family, and that I can afford to have some extra nice things. But I realize, he said to me, that not all people have that blessing of a good job. And I thought, wow, that's great, to be thankful for what he had, to rejoice that he could provide for his family, and then also to have the humility to realize that, other people didn't have what he has. That job, that security, the job security plus the financial well-being of a good job that way. And so he was one that modeled to me that, he didn't love money. He appreciated money. He appreciated his job. But he didn't let that go to his head. He was just a down-to-earth, really good, friendly guy. And he did a lot of good in his community as well. He still does. But, so Paul gives us that verse, which, as I said, is so often misquoted. But it's the love of money. And it could be the love of anything, not just money, but the love of power, the love of position, the love of, whatever it might be. Whatever it is that you love more than God, whatever you put in front of God is your God, and whatever you kind of idolize. I mean, we kind of get that way, and, certain things. I remember different times growing up that I thought, man, if I could have that car, or man, if I could have, whatever, but, it always turns out that having that thing isn't enough. Having that thing doesn't bring all of the joy, all of the ecstasy, the satisfaction and fulfillment. What brings satisfaction and fulfillment in life is having meaningful relationships with others around you, with having a job or an occupation that is nurturing to yourself, that supplies your needs for your family. I know people that work and they just hate their job, but they do it because it's a job. And I don't know what else I do. Well, and I have empathy for those people because they feel caught, they feel trapped. And in some ways it's hard to venture out and start something new, and hard to start a new job, to give up what security you have in something in a lot of ways, but yet, to be content with who we are, with who we know, and with our lifestyle, it says an awful lot. And so these are a lot of things that Paul reflects upon and talks about in here. And as we read in verse 11, he goes on, and again it's reflective back to Galatians, where it's the fruits of the Spirit and fruits of the flesh. He says, but as for you, shun all of these things. So to shun all of the bad things. But instead, he says, pursue righteousness and godliness. Pursue faith, love, endurance, gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Take a hold of eternal life for which you were called. So, he's saying, to put behind you all of that greed, all of that longing for better things that, I don't know how I should say it that way, but because we want to better our lives. But, don't get so caught up in a lot of the ways of the world. But to find in your life what it is that brings you peace, contentment, joy, love, and laughter, what makes you happy. And there are a lot of people that just aren't happy. But to find what it is that makes you happy is a big thing. And I think for a lot of people, if they could know the joy of loving God, to know the joy of living each day as a forgiven sinner, because sometimes we forget that too, that we are loved and forgiven sinners. So Paul finishes this chapter, or this book, with this chapter 6 of ways to be content by our godliness, ways of being content when we realize that our faith and trust in God is enough, and that when we realize that our faith and trust in God and our living a godly life can bring us more joy and contentment than the pursuit of the love of money or the pursuit of whatever it might be that seems to be that golden nugget up in the sky that's going to be the fix-all, the end-all, because none of those are. The best thing we can do is to know God and to know Jesus and to know that our sins are forgiven. So, Paul says, if you're rich in this age, well, share. Don't be haughty. Do good with each other. But also, the very final thing he says, Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to you. Avoid the profane chatter and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. So basically he's saying, live your life with care, with caution, with trust and faith in God. And don't be swayed by the ways of the world. And the world pulls and tugs at us. The world tells us we want this, we need this. Your life will be better with this. If only you have this, everything will be better. And I see a lot of times, somebody's advertising something for sale that they bought, never used. They buy it because it's going to make life so much better, and then they never use it. Well, sisters and brothers, please use your faith in God. Use that knowledge that you have that you are a loved and forgiven sinner. May God richly bless you today. I'll see you tomorrow morning live at 9 o'clock from Mabel Lutheran in Sutton.